Welcome to the very first episode of Master of Jacks, presented by Jesters Comedy Improv. I am your host, Wooly Woolhouse, and tonight we are going to be speaking with a guest who has no idea what his area of expertise is until I introduce him. And tonight's guest is Kristoff Kennsington, who has invented almost every single child's board game in the last 50 years. And I figured with so many families at home right now in quarantine, this is the perfect time to learn about the gentleman who invented so many of our children's favorite games. So please welcome to the show, Kristoff Kennsington. Kristoff, welcome to Master of Jacks, our very first guest. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good.
Just
a little
pretty
bit
good?
of I feel a lot of weight on my shoulders, kind of carrying all the happiness of all the people stuck at home right now. It's kind of a burden, but I'm always trying to come up with a new game, and especially feel that challenge at this time right now. And I've got some ideas, but none of them have really taken off.
No, I understand you hit gold a lot, so it's hard to bat 1,000 for your entire career.
I did pretty well 40 years ago, and
right.
That was nice.
Well, I just want to, in the business, we call them lobbing softballs at you. I'd like to throw a couple easy questions to you, but first, I do have to give a shout out to our sponsor, Cisco Classic Pudding. 7 pounds of pudding in one can. It's parfait for the course. Classic chocolate pudding. 7 pounds. Get it wherever you find food in giant cans. First question.
Gotta enjoy the classics. Just gotta enjoy the classics.
Absolutely. Speaking of classics, can you just take us back to the very first board game you ever invented? What was that game?
It was about a 4x4 white space, and it had 2 dots on it, and it was whoever touched one of those dots first won. I called it Dots.
And how successful was that game?
It sold 2 to my parents.
Well,
they eventually divorced over that game.
We'll go in a little different way then. What's your most favorite game that you've invented of all time?
Oh, probably Parcheesi. It made me a lot of money.
You would take us. Where did you get the inspiration for the game Parcheesi?
Oh, I stole it off a couple of people on the street one day.
So is that where you find a lot of your inspiration? Just kind of looking at strangers around the world?
Are you recording this?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Oh no, I most of them are just things that come off to the top of my head when I'm wandering the world.
All right. I know we're very early in this interview, but I need to get into the controversial subjects. The biggest one being that at about 1985, that'd be about 10 years before the internet really took off, both Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley just scrapped you completely from their history, to the point that if you look up the name Kristoff Kennsington on the internet, you're not going to find anything related to board games anymore. What happened to that relationship between you, the Parker Brothers, and Milton Bradley?
Well, let's say it was a bit of a tawdry bedroom situation. We were playing board games in the bedroom at the headquarters. They shared a factory back then, kind of a split down the middle, like an old sitcom style.
With
Parker Brothers,
the line of tape.
Yeah, if you cross this side, Parker Brothers, they get in a fight with Milton Bradley, that kind of thing. And I had one square in the middle with tape that I had. That's where the bed was. And we were testing out one of the games, and trying to decide who would buy for that game that week, or for the rights for that game. And well, it was Monopoly, and let's say they both wanted a monopoly on that one.
Jumping back now to the Milton Bradley, Parker Brothers, Kennsington kind of riff there. You mentioned it in your book, and I wanted to live up to my end of the bargain. You doing your first public interview in over 30 years. Push your book, your self-published book, I'm Game, this is the only copy you've published so far. You're self-publishing it and could only afford the one. But there's a whole chapter in here that's just some of the nicknames you used to call the Parker Brothers. If you want to throw a couple of them out here, I thought they were borderline offensive, but still hilarious.
Oh, there's the Porker Brothers. There's the Parker Brothers. You can see the Parker Brothers. The hand gesture sells that one.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And your little illustration here of Milton Bradley as Einstein.
Right.
That the first part of the book was a lot of friendship in there, and it was kind of sad to see that dissolve kind of as quickly as it did, in the story at least, of you, Milton Bradley, and the Parker Brothers. Do you still talk to any of them?
Oh, they're dead. I had nothing to do with it.
One of the stories in the book that really tugged at the heartstrings was the time you were attacked by hippos in Africa, which inspired the game Hungry Hungry Hippos. Can you take us back to that day, that safari trip that you had with Joni Mattel, which is the same trip she invented the Barbie doll, when you were attacked by those hungry hippos?
Yeah, it was a surprisingly pleasant day for the African Sahara. We were on a safari, and we thought, we might as well stop here, cool down a bit. So I jumped in with my parents, my brother, my sister, and we were just kind of swimming around. And all of a sudden, we heard little splashes around us, and we thought, bugs or something. And then next thing I know, I hear blood-curdling screams, cracking of bones, drowning of humans, and hungry, hungry hippos, which I cried out, "Help! The hippos! They're so very hungry, hungry!" And there's Joni up on the shore, writing things down, scribbling, winking for some reason. And the next thing I know, we're back in America. I'm traumatized. I have a part of my foot is missing because the hippos so hungry.
Yes.
And a year later, massive hit, Hungry Hungry Hippos. Apparently, while I was out, kind of recuperating from my injury, Joni had signed away the rights to the entire story. I thought maybe publishing rights, maybe, she's going to help me write a book about this, or maybe even turn it into a movie. But no, it was the board game rights. And my cut of it, you think maybe she'd at least give me residuals, but no, I get copies of Hungry Hungry Hippos for every 10 games that sell. I have way too many copies of Hungry Hungry Hippos.
Hungry Hungry Hippos is your 5th best-selling board game that you've created. We'll go through the top 5 real quick. Number 5, Hungry Hungry Hippos. Number 4, Sorry. Number 3, the Scooby-Doo version of Clue. Number 2, Monopoly. And number 1 was very surprising. It was Chutes and Ladders. Now, I understand Chutes and Ladders was another one that has a bit of a tragic background.
So this was maybe 3-4 years after the hippos had been so hungry and eaten my family. They were very hungry. And I had forgiven Joni, and we were just walking by. We were going to grab lunch and say hello to my uncle, who was working at a construction site. Yes.
If we could, real quick, speaking of Hungry, our sponsor again tonight is Classic Chocolate Pudding, 7-pound cans worth. Buy them wherever you are hungry. Kristoff Kennsington is talking about Chutes and Ladders. Go ahead, Kristoff.
So as I was saying, perhaps we would have gotten some pudding to take to my uncle, but we were going to see my uncle. He was working at a construction site, and he was up, 4 or 5 stories, and just kind of waved at him to say hello, uncle. And he looked down and wasn't as sure-footed as he should have been, and he fell down one of the chutes at the site, to throw building materials down, and died. And I was distraught, naturally, and Joni came over, consoled me, put her arm around me, handed me a contract, said she would like to buy the rights to the story, and I, of course, my uncle was laying there dead at my feet, having fallen down a chute. I was out of my mind. I signed it. Similar contract, only less beneficial to me. 1 copy of Hungry Hungry Hippos for every 100 Chutes and Ladders games sold. Again, I have way too many copies of Hungry Hungry Hippos.
That's understandable. I would be not the journalist I'm aspiring to be if I didn't introduce my surprise guest. This gentleman, unfortunately, has had more than a dozen family members of his killed while playing various board games created by you, Kristoff Kennsington. It's my understanding he's reached out to you a number of times only to be rebuked every single time, and I need to bring him out. Please welcome my very special surprise guest, Rich Andrews. Rich, thank you for agreeing to be a part of this. Again, my condolences on the dozen or so family members who have been killed playing various board games created by Kristoff Kennsington. I want to give you a moment to just kind of introduce yourself officially to Mr. Kennsington.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing me on. Obviously, this has been a very trying time for my family and I. We just feel that the realism that Kristoff has brought into his games has absolutely no place in children's board games. It's a tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. The Hungry Hungry Hippos recreated his experience, and he wanted to share his pain with the rest of the world. And it will not stand. It will not stand.
If I can just run through a quick list I have here of some of the ways some of your family members have passed, and I apologize if this is just adding to the traumatic experience you're going through currently, Rich. You've had 2 grandparents choked to death on the marbles found in Hungry Hungry Hippos. You had 1 aunt who got stuck inside mousetrap and couldn't reach a phone for 2 weeks, starved to death. 13 different family members have cut themselves on the paper money in Monopoly. That Hi-Ho Cheerio game, 6 cousins have choked to death on those cherries. There's actually a lot of choking deaths in here. The gingerbread men from Candyland, you've had 1 brother choke to death on that. Go ahead.
Well, and just... It's just unbelievable. I mean, you even left out my cousin who had the kerplunk sticks go right into his eyes.
A lot to take there, Kristoff. Do you have anything to say to Rich?
Let's see. Do any of your former family members know how to read? Because all of those boxes, I believe, say choking hazard, stabbing hazard. How else did they die, Dick? I can't remember.
You make children's games. They shouldn't be hazardous. My 1-year-old was crushed under a falling Jenga tower.
That game is for 3 and up.
And that's why, with my lawyer, we will see to it that every one of these games is pulled off the shelves. Every one of them. Except the only one that I want from you, and that is sorry.
That does seem like the least you could do is at least offer Mr. Andrews a sorry card.
Otherwise, you'll be getting into trouble.
Mr. Kennsington, this sounds like a very serious situation. Lawyers are getting involved. I really feel like you should say something to kind of level this out.
All I gotta say is, put up your dukes. Let's fight a little better than your grandma apparently could.
All right. You know what? I'm gonna cut this off, Mr. Kennsington. Rich Andrews, I apologize for that. When I invited you on here, I really thought that this was going to be a little more civilized from a man of such esteem in the world of children's board games. I certainly did not mean any of that to happen. If I added any more trauma to your family's various dozens of tragedies, I apologize.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, but what's more important is that the word is getting out. And if the actions of these can save any other families from experiencing the pain that I've gone through, as well as getting me a large cash settlement, then it's worth it.
You know what else is worth it? 7 pounds of canned fudge. Sorry, 7 pounds of chocolate pudding. Better than 7 pounds of fudge. Your colon will thank you. Rich Andrews, I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm sorry Mr. Kennsington could not say his goodbyes. Remember, his book, I'm Game, will someday be available on Amazon. Rich Andrews, I wish you the best.
Not if I have anything to say about it.
It's actually really good. Do you want me to send you a copy?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay,
please.
I will. Rich Andrews, everyone. This has been the very first edition of Master of Jack, brought to you by Jesters Comedy Improv and brought to you by 7 pounds of chocolate pudding. We thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again the next time we interview a subject who has no idea what they are an expert in. This has been Master of Jack. I'm Wooly Woolhouse. Thank you very much.